Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Comic Book Syndicate. This is a very special episode. We're here to review The Batman. I'm your co-host, Mike-EL, and I'm joined by a single special guest this week, Andrew Barry Helmer.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me. We're kind of under duress here. We've got power about to go out in your apartment. We've got construction going on next to my house, but we're going to get through this, right?
We are definitely going to power through this.
Awesome. And you do a podcast called That Was a Show, which we always like to plug. So why don't you tell everybody where you can find that?
You can find it at, well, if you're less social media savvy, you can just go to thatwasashow.com. You can find us wherever your podcasts are, wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you're listening to this podcast. You can find us on social media at That Was a Show on Instagram.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So, I mean...
Where do we start?
The Batman.
Okay, now, you know what? I don't even know if we need to bother with a plot summary. Everyone knows what this movie's about. I you know what I mean? Like, yeah. Whatever. You know, you don't. I'll just say very quickly, I'm a huge Batman fan. He's my third favorite superhero, obviously. I think of all the media franchises, I get probably most excited about Star Wars, then Batman, although that changed probably lately. I was not a fan of Ben Affleck or Zack Snyder. What's your take? Yeah, but other than that, I mean, the Nolan movies are my favorite superhero movies. Mm-hmm. I love the Adam West Batman. I love the Batman animated series. You know, I got tons of comics. What's your take on Batman?
Huge Batman nerd. Batman is like a passion for me. I always say he's my second favorite superhero, but he probably is, with the amount of Batman that I've read. He's got to be my first, but I like to have a niche and say Daredevil, but really,
cool.
I've read so much Batman and I love Batman, and I feel pretty much the same about the Snyder stuff. I'm not a Snyder fan at all. Sorry, everybody out there who's very angry about that. I did not mind Ben Affleck. I didn't like Snyder's take on Batman.
Sure.
Affleck's a good Bruce Wayne, better Bruce Wayne than he is a Batman. Which is something I think we'll end up talking about on the difference between an actor being a good Batman and a good Bruce Wayne. There's all kinds of different things. And yeah, Affleck was fine. Nolan's movies are great. Love Christian Bale. Really huge fan of Batman Begins. It's one of my absolute favorite movies ever. I love Burton's Batmans and just anything Batman, man.
Right. And Superman is my favorite character, and then maybe Spider-Man. But
sure.
The thing about Batman is, I think since at least 1989, I think that I think they've gotten him right more than any other character. Like the animated series is great. The Burton movies are great.
Yeah.
Even the Schumacher movies have some charm.
Sure.
All the animated series have something to offer. The comics, again, there's some things I don't like, but overall, I feel like they figured out how to make Batman work, and even if they don't always do it, they have a formula. Whereas with Superman, oh my God, he's my favorite character, but like no one knows how to make him work, right?
No, I agree. I agree. There's, I obviously, I like the Richard Donner Superman movie, but
yes, me too.
That's, and elements of Superman stuff that's been sprinkled out there. I think Brandon Routh is a great Superman in both the Superman Returns and when he got to play him, like whenever that was a couple of years ago as a Kingdom Come Superman. But yeah, we don't get the dearth of Batman. Like Batman is such a malleable character in that, like, it's it's a simple story, billionaires fighting crime. But you can have a good take on Batman. A lot of them skew similar, sure, but this one, like the Batman, especially in the movie we watched this week, it shows exactly like when a creator gets it right, you can have your own spin on the character, your own spin on Gotham and all the supporting cast, and you can tell a great story.
So I'm just going to tell you before even going in, Matt Reeves, I'm a fan of his because of Let Me In. Have you seen Let Me In?
Yeah, I've seen Let Me In. Yeah, and Cloverfield.
Yep.
I'm a Cloverfield guy. My mileage varies on the apes.
Me too. I actually love the first Apes movie, which he didn't direct, and then
he didn't.
No, the second one, which he did, I didn't know it was him, and I thought it was a little dull, so I didn't even watch the third one, to be honest.
I only just saw it not too long ago, and I think I felt about the same about it as I did about the second one. They're excellently put together movies, just maybe not my franchise.
Sure, gotcha, yep. So going into this movie, first of all, I was totally happy and ecstatic about Robert Pattinson being cast. I never had an issue with that because, first of all, I enjoyed the Twilight movies. Spoiler alert! I enjoyed the Twilight movies, guys. Okay, you can stop listening now. I'm not saying they're great. I'm saying I enjoyed them. Okay, but he has gone on to do 15 or 20 movies since then.
And how long ago were those movies?
Exactly.
We're over a decade past that for both him and Kristen Stewart. They've both redeemed themselves many times.
Yes. So I'm not even going to get into the whole Twilight thing. I'm just going to say that I was happy about that. The first trailer looked good. The second trailer, I think, blew everyone's mind with the Batman. Mm-hmm. The third one, I started to get worried because I felt like it gave too much away, and I wasn't as big a fan. There might have been a fourth trailer that I didn't even watch.
I stopped watching trailers. Right, if I can make it to not even seeing a second trailer, I'm usually pretty happy. I
agree with you. I don't want to know anything going in. Yeah. But going into this movie, I was fully prepared. What I wanted it to be was I wanted it to be Seven with Batman in it, right? I wanted it to be a David Fincher film, right?
Yep, absolutely. And right out of the gate. The opening scene, right out of the gate.
Yep. So how about this? Why don't you give without getting into specifics, gauge how your enjoyment was throughout the movie. Because some people have said they liked the first half and not the second half and blah, blah, blah. But tell us what your impression was of the film.
My impression of the film, I am very seldom as enthusiastic about loving a film right out of the gate as I am on this one. This movie just did everything right for me in a way that I am I guess maybe I still can feel like this about movies. I wasn't really nitpicking as I was watching it. I was just really taken for a ride. I mean, it's a 3-hour movie that maybe on a rewatch you might feel a length, but because it's such an evolving mystery as the film goes on, I was just there for every step of the way. So I would say my enjoyment, I went in excited, but I had my expectations kind of tempered, for every amazing superhero movie we've had, a half a dozen mediocre ones, right? So I kind of went in, I liked what I was seeing, but I was also I don't know, we'll see. Right off the bat, the movie starts with a scene that introduces the Riddler that basically is right out of Zodiac. Right out of Zodiac. It's a horror movie in the first scene, and I was like, okay, let's do it. Mm-hmm. And then Batman 89, we follow Batman a lot before we even get to Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne the movie is called The Batman for a reason. Bruce Wayne is not the star of this film.
No.
The Batman is. And so my excitement stayed pretty much consistent throughout.
Okay, I'm going to try and describe how I felt watching this. So, because I have to analyze how I'm feeling when I'm watching a movie because I know I'm going to review it, right? So I'm sitting there, I'm going, okay, I'm not bored. I'm not, I'm not questioning things. I'm not criticizing things for the most part. Mm-hmm. And I think the tone totally works. I'm watching the movie. I'm like, this is the tone that I want. And even though I love the Nolan films, I think this, in a way, I don't know. It's a little bit more noir. It's a little bit more almost like Blade Runner-esque. Even with the voiceover narration, right?
Yeah, it's just pouring. It's pouring rain all the time, Blade Runner and Seven, and it just everything is grimy and nothing like the subway system is disgusting. Like there's a scene on a subway platform and you're like, how is Gotham City even operating? Like, it's so gross. Gotham City is decaying. And yeah, I think you're right. The tone of it is so noir. I mean, for long comic book fans out there, like Batman's first voiceover narration is October 31st. So it's like starts right out of the gate with a long Halloween reference. And like, and then, yeah, like I was excited to get some Batman narration because it's such a key part of comics. And if you do it right, it can work. But it's not really in the movie. And once it wasn't there, I wasn't missing it. So
sure.
Yeah, like it kind of bookends the film. Like he kind of has like a little inner monologue, but it's not throughout the film. And I think that worked enough.
So, okay, but I'm going to tell you now, because I did listen to some other reviews, and some people feel like the movie completely shifted gears maybe halfway through. I don't necessarily feel that at all. However, I do feel like, when you're watching a movie and sometimes there's flaws in the plot, a lot of directors are able to sort of cover it up. And I think Marvel does this a lot, where sometimes you watch a Marvel Studios film and you're like, wow, that was awesome. And then you think about it and you're like, well, that didn't make sense. And that didn't make sense. And that didn't make sense. But they're able to, I guess in a way, dazzle you so you don't really care. And sometimes that's okay, because sometimes great movies, like even I think was To Have and Have Not with Humphrey Bogart, has a massive plot hole that nobody cares about because the characters are so good and the directing is so good, right? The author of the book actually didn't know who the killer was. That's the major plot hole, right? So it is possible to have plot holes and have them kind of just fall by the wayside, not have anyone worry about them. But I think the thing with this movie was there was a couple moments that I want to talk about, and we are going to get into spoilers here, where I started to, okay, I'll give you the first one. The first time I kind of like, you're almost like you're hypnotized. The first time I was almost woke up from being hypnotized was when Catwoman called Batman Vengeance. Do you remember that? Well, yeah, wait, why don't you do it? You're Vengeance. Remember the way she said that?
Yes.
It was to the point where I was like...
Penguin does it. Penguin does it too.
Does it? Okay, because I was like, wait, is that his name? Like, is this one of those CW show things where the Flash is not the Flash, he's the Streak? Is he actually called Vengeance? Because the way she says it, I'm like, how does she know that he calls himself Vengeance? I know that he said it to the guys he beat up at the beginning.
I kind of laughed too, because my brain immediately like cut to him introducing himself again as Vengeance to her, but like nicer. Hi, I'm Vengeance.
Right.
You come here often.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Like, what the hell is this? So that kind of took me out of it a little bit.
I think the implication is more, he's probably been like, criminals have quoted him saying that.
Okay.
Because he's in the news, people are talking about the Batman and stuff like that, and the only thing anybody's ever heard him say is "I'm Vengeance."
Right. Okay. So since we're on it, I might as well give you a couple more. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm watching the movie now. The opening scene with the toughs beating up the guy, and then Batman comes out of the subway or whatever. Now, that scene was in the trailer. He beats the crap out of the guys. He gets really violent with one of them, I think. But did you notice how odd the directing style and the music was? Because in a typical action film, you want to feel the excitement of the main character beating the crap out of these guys, like the visceral, like exciting music and him beating the crap out of them, whatever. In this movie, and I don't know if this is a conscious choice or not, I felt like the camera stayed back, so you could almost like watch them from far away, which again could have been like a Daredevil TV show choice. Like, let's actually see this fight. But I also thought the music was purposely, it stayed almost flat. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I think so, and I do think it was kind of conscious. I think at least part of this Batman is something we don't get a lot. Is he is violent, but you don't really get a sense that he relishes it. It's not something like, this is not a Frank Miller Batman. He's not laughing as he's doing it inside or anything like that. This is, And this is a Batman, the movie specifically, where he really doesn't resort to violence all that much. Like he mostly is, I'm solving crimes and I kick some asses every now and then. So yeah, maybe there is a subduedness to it where like it's not overly glamorous, or played for excitement. And there's a marked difference, I think, that from where some of the action comes in the last act, because he is doing heroic things. So the music is coming in these big operatic sweeps and stuff like that.
Sure. Okay. Okay. And now, again, we'll save spoilers for later. We'll give the audience a warning here. But I also want to talk about the tone of the film. Now, you mentioned that Bruce Wayne is barely in this film, because he really isn't. I mean, you only see him out of costume, like 2 or 3 times maybe, right?
Yep.
Now, here's the thing with that is, on one hand, you could argue that it kind of shows that Batman is the real persona. Yeah. And that he almost doesn't even know how to be Bruce Wayne. Whereas Christian Bale was putting on a show. Like, I'm going to be an airhead playboy and be stupid and, right?
Yeah. Which is, it's like, which is classic Bruce Wayne,
Right.
Yeah.
So in this film, though, I think one of the problems I had was that because Bruce Wayne was almost exactly the same as Batman, there's no let up in the tone. And if you go back to the Tim Burton Batman films, which tonally I love, one of the things I like is that when you're with Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne, who of course started as a comedian, there is some funny moments, like remember when he's sitting in the room with Vicky Vale and he's like, I don't think I've ever been in this room before, Yeah. And when he's Bruce Wayne interacting with people, he's got a completely different personality. Now, again, is that
very conscious?
Yeah, is it acting?
And here's why.
Okay, go ahead. Okay,
I think that in a new Batman saga, I think we're going to see him become Bruce Wayne as opposed to the other way around. Okay. We know how he gets to be Batman, but in this early part of his career, like, he's broken. He does not function. Alfred is definitely not a butler in this. He's more of a caretaker. Like, he really is trying to make sure, like, he's making sure Bruce is eating, like, he's making sure Bruce is showering. Like, Bruce is not anybody but Batman, and he doesn't really have a public persona. We're sort of coming at him in a similar way of where he's at in Dark Knight Rises. He's completely withdrawn from society to the point where, like, when people see him, like, they're like, oh shit, look, there's that guy. He's creepy. Like, he's not charming at all. And I think it will be interesting because I know Pattinson knows how to play charming. Right. So I think you're going to see him develop, a Bruce Wayne persona that keeps him different, right? Because the real thing is, that is how Batman is. Batman is Batman. And he and Bruce is the mask, right? Whereas he doesn't have that right now.
Right. Okay. Now, what about this? Let's talk about Alfred for a minute, because one of the things... Now, I'm going to ask you right out of the gate, who is your favorite actor to ever play Alfred?
Michael Caine.
Okay, because my favorite is the one from the Tim Burton films, which was it Alfred?
Michael Gough.
Michael Gough, okay. He is my favorite. Partly because I like the actor, but also because to me that's the same one as the comic book, also the animated series. And those guys are, now again, I don't have any knowledge of the United Kingdom class system that officially or unofficially exists, but to me, when I think of a butler, I think of that guy, I think of that accent, and I think of that sort of aloof British sense of humor that all those actors have. Even the old one from the Adam West TV show. I can't remember his name. Alan Napier, I think it was.
Alan Napier. I was like, oh man, I wish I didn't know all this.
Alan Napier. I know. Yeah. But anyway, so I like the fact that, first of all, not only are they... like, this whole newer trend towards making Alfred more and more like, oh, he used to be a soldier and he's a badass or he was a spy. To me... Or whatever he was, whatever he may be.
He's always been a spy. Has he always been a spy? Yeah, well, I mean, once they started giving him backstory, once he stopped serving tea, which
is fine. But I it's almost like Q in James Bond. I want Q to be an old feeble old man.
Yeah,
I agree
with you on. I agree with you on the Q one, and for the most part, I agree with you on the Alfred one. I think it comes from two things. One, we're going away from it. It's weird for Bruce Wayne to have a butler. It's just weird. We're getting away from that. And we started getting that in like Michael Caine, Jeremy Irons, and now Andy Serkis. They're all more Bruce's partner in this, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's more about becoming. It's trying to get rid of the subservient relationship to it. And I think in this one, I went in being like, Andy Serkis, really? Mm-hmm. That's who you chose? Like he's like 20. He's like 22 years older than Pattinson. Like that's not, and I thought the same about Irons. Like Irons, I was like, well, he's not all that, like the age difference between him and Affleck is not that great. Right. Right.
And because Affleck's older, Affleck's like over 50, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So like this, I didn't know how I felt about it. Cause I was like, well, and not only that, but he's not proper. He's not like he's a tough.
Right.
Or at least the circus that we often get in movies is he's a tough guy, right? And the movie justifies it really nicely in one single line. I went, I get it. He's not.
Which line?
He wasn't the family butler. He was Thomas Wayne's bodyguard.
I missed that. Okay, yeah. I missed that. Okay.
Yeah, like maybe he posed as a butler or something, but he has a line where he says, "I was supposed to protect your father, and I failed," and that's a thing. And I was like, okay, I get why he's tough. I get why he's not that much older, and I get why
sure.
So now, but we don't get a lot of him in the movie.
Yeah, that's true. We don't get a lot of him. You're right.
Yeah, not a big role.
It's funny because Michael Caine, I guess I'm not as big as a fan of Michael Caine as everyone else. Mm-hmm. And I thought he was miscast as Alfred. I didn't like him as Alfred. I didn't like his, because I mean, he is a classic, as far as I know, isn't he? He's got a Cockney accent. And I don't associate the Cockney accent with someone in that role. Again, I'm not an expert on British culture, but that doesn't seem right to me.
Interesting. I mean, I like him. I think he's a good, I have no real complaints. I feel like he really brings the father to the role. That is definitely needs. Like in this, like, you don't necessarily feel that Serkis is necessarily a father. Like, even though I think he is supposed to be a father figure to Bruce.
Sure.
I don't feel the difference in age enough for it to really kind of land. But you do get the sense that, like, he really cares about Bruce and stuff like that. So yeah, Michael Caine. That's the part that I think Michael Caine really sells.
Okay.
Right? Like, Michael Caine really sells how much he loves, like, Bruce.
Sure. Well, it's funny because I'm not a fan of Zack Snyder, but I thought Jeremy Irons was fine in that role. I think he's a great actor.
Absolutely.
I thought he suited that role. Andy Serkis, not a big fan of him in this role, but he was fine. He was okay. But again...
Room to grow.
Room to grow, and you also don't... There's no contrast, right? Like, even in... with tone, even if... Like, Alfred can be the comic relief. That's one of the roles he serves. And again, there's no comic relief with him either, which I thought took me out of it a little bit.
I was okay with that because I actually, if I do have some slight hiccups with the Nolan movies, despite honestly considering, well, 2 out of 3 of them at least, to be like some of my favorite superhero movies ever, or Batman movies, or movies ever. Sometimes I do find the tonal switch to comedy in those movies a little jarring. Whereas in this one, like you don't really, like, in 7, there's not a huge amount of jokes. This was in the in the Long Halloween. There's not a lot of jokes.
I'll give you one joke in 7. Remember when the captain or the lieutenant, remember when he's sitting at the desk and he picks up the phone, their phone's ringing, he picks up and goes, "This isn't even my desk," and he just hangs up. Moments like that are great, right?
There's a few moments. There's a few. And there's I would say probably an equal number of tiny moments like that in this. Jeffrey Wright has some good lines.
Sure.
The police chief, his first line to Batman is like, "It's Halloween, must be your favorite goddamn night."
Yeah. That's funny. Here's the thing. We usually kind of save the characters for last, but I guess what we'll do is we'll go through each of the actors, then we'll talk about the plot and the spoilers towards the end, okay? So do you want to just jump to Robert Pattinson, because we haven't really talked about him that much.
Sure.
Okay. So why don't we jump to our lead actor, which is Robert Pattinson. We've already talked about him a little bit. We've talked about his career, but why don't we talk about his performance in this movie?
Sure.
I guess I can say, even though the Nolan films are my favorite Batman films, I think he had by far the worst costume, Christian Bale, by far.
I'm not a massive fan either.
Right. And I've always thought that Tim Burton's design was the best, but I have to say now, I think Robert Pattinson's cowl design is my new favorite. I think he looks... The design is incredible, and I think he looks perfect, right? Because that square jaw. What is your take on the look of Batman?
Yeah, the look of Batman in this, I really like it. I mean, I think it takes a lot of good cues from the places that I like. It's got the classic black and gray elements to it. It does even takes bits from the Nolan costume that I did like. Like, it's not that I dislike the Nolan costumes; they're just not my favorite. Like, I like that they are functional, and I think this definitely takes all of that into account. Like, this is a movie where Batman is on camera so much of the time, and he's in conversations most of the time, and he never looks stiff doing it. Like, he never, like, he's able to move so all that's great. I like the cowl. I like the weird collar that has the cape tucked in to it. I just really like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I'm looking at pictures of Robert Pattinson as Batman online. Every picture looks good. Now, one of the things that I think really hurt Nolan's Batman design, even though the costume itself was okay, I thought the mask was terrible. But I also think that I thought the lighting was weird, and that it's almost like they didn't know how to light Batman in the Nolan films, whereas in the Tim Burton films and in this film, they knew exactly how to keep him in the shadows to maintain that kind of illusion of mystique, right? Or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I mean, this kind of crosses over into cinematography, but I really think that they knew how to make him look cool on screen. Like, absolutely. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. Or they make him he looks more natural in these settings than he necessarily does. Like, he sticks out a little in the Nolan cinematography, and like Wally Pfister is such an amazing cinematography, and like I love the look of the Nolan movies, so I really don't have a lot of complaints on that, but like they're slick. They look very slick, and like they're modern, and like maybe Begins a little less. Like Begins, and probably a little more so with Begins, they do some better Batman lighting in Begins, I think, than in Dark Knight or Dark Knight Rises. But in this, like, Batman, he fits, right? And yeah, the lighting is a big part of that. Like, Greg Fraser is a great cinematographer, so like, yeah, it all looks good. You know what I realized as we were talking? It reminds me a little of the Arkham City games. The suit. Okay. Like, not obviously he's not a beast, but like there's bits of armor to it, but it's cool. I like that spoiler alert, I like that his bat insignia on his chest doubles as a knife.
I love that too. Yeah. I love that too. Apparently that's been used before, but I don't think I've seen it. Have you?
Who knows?
Okay.
Maybe not. Yeah. I don't remember. I mean, sometimes his insignia is like specifically a target, or like it's been a whole bunch of shit.
Right. Now, here's the thing is, we've already talked how I thought that there was a little bit, the tone was a little bit monotonous for me, and I wish I could have seen some comic relief or contrast. However, with what we got, I thought Robert Pattinson was perfect, right? Like, he was playing that version of Batman perfectly. Yeah. And I think physically, obviously, he looks perfect. And he, is playing that damaged, sullen kind of take on Bruce Wayne perfectly. So I have no complaints other than, like I said, what I've said earlier about his take on Batman. So no complaints there, yeah. So now we're going to jump. We haven't even mentioned this character yet. Now we're going to jump to Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, I know that maybe I've been accused of, nullifying my opinion by commenting on a woman's looks. I'll say she's beautiful, and then I'll jump to what I thought of her performance. Her performance was great. You know what I mean? Like, her performance was great. I thought there wasn't what can I say about it? It was perfect. It was, note perfect.
Yes.
Her interplay with Robert Pattinson was great, right? Her the way that she handled herself in the club, the way that she handled herself against the bad guys or whatever. I thought she was perfect for this role, especially in contrast to Anne Hathaway, which we'll talk about in a minute. But what did you think of Zoe Kravitz?
Genuine, yes, I agree with you completely. I think I think she does a great take on Catwoman. Catwoman, much like Batman, is a character that I think you can come into with your own take on it. And she definitely brings that. Like, she brings a lot of the best elements of like early, like year one type Catwoman into this. Like, really a lot of like the the Jeff Loeb early Catwoman stories, the Ed Brubaker stuff. Like, this is all good. She has a bit of a, I'm trying to think exactly how to describe like kind of like the tone she adopts, but it kind of rings. There's a bit of brings like a 50s quality to it. Like, there's a bit of a film noir element to like the pitter patter of like her back and forth. Like, there's a little like, she calls everybody baby and sugar, and like it's I just really liked her, and it was great to see her bouncing against Batman. They have great chemistry together, and like I want to see more. I mean, they have great chemistry in the way that like he is just so awkward around her in a way that you don't ever see in anything, because this Bruce Wayne does not know how to talk to girls. He does not. And Batman pretends like he maybe does, but you can still see the way his body changes when she's in the scene. Like, she puts him off his game in a way that the movie doesn't hammer home or anything. It's all in like just kind of like his kind of like more awkward movements. Great. Love it.
That's a good point. And one of the things about Catwoman, even going back to Julie Newmar, is that I think one of the keys about her is she is a criminal.
Yeah.
Right? And so therefore, to me, she has to be more street smart than Bruce Wayne. She has to be. That's part of her character.
Yes.
And Julie Newmar had it. Zoe Kravitz has it. I don't even think Michelle Pfeiffer really had it, because Michelle Pfeiffer
wasn't a traditional take on
right.
Catwoman or Selena Kyle. Great performance, great character, not the same one.
Totally, you're right. And Anne Hathaway. I mean, Anne Hathaway, I like her. She's nice. She's cool, but
I love her Catwoman. I'll just
really?
say it right
okay.
out.
See, for me, I took it as like Anne Hathaway is too prim and she's a prim and proper person who's acting like this jewel thief. I didn't buy her as Catwoman at all, to be honest.
I really love her Catwoman. She's a very she's not an early Catwoman. She's a Catwoman who's been doing it a long time. She's found herself, like she knows how to pretend now. So I think that's in there in her performance. Like she's just a straight up femme fatale in Dark Knight Rises, and I love it. Like I have less mileage on her like staying around to help out at the end of Dark Knight Rises.
Sure.
I'm cool with it. It was the end of a trilogy, so you're gonna do, it makes sense. But her early stuff in Dark Knight Rises, I love, like her getting one over on, like her robbing Bruce Wayne, her, her that when she, the scene where the cops barge in and she immediately, like, she just acts like a frightened girl and they ignore her, and then she just like straightens up and just fucks off. I love it.
Yeah, I'm definitely much more of a fan of Zoe Kravitz. Actually, one of the things I do like is it is clear that she's younger and she's inexperienced, and even though she can take care of herself physically, she does come off as younger and more vulnerable, right? Like, she's still wounded by this twist that we'll talk about later. I won't reveal it now, but this is still hanging over her, and I don't know. Yeah, I thought she did a really, really good job. I was a huge fan of her.
Agreed.
Okay, so now we're going to jump to, we'll save some of the people for later, but now we're going to jump to a very unusual choice, Colin Farrell as the Penguin. I started, earlier in his career, I really disliked Colin Farrell. I didn't become a fan until True Detective Season 2, and then I saw him in that and a couple other movies, and now I have huge respect for him. I actually think he's a really, really good actor. And, as far as, the question of, well, instead of casting Colin Farrell in this role, why didn't they just get someone who's sort of like actually fit this role physically? I other than that question, I thought he did a great job as the Penguin, a completely new take on the character as far as I can tell, but I thought he was great. What'd you think?
Yeah, I agree. I pretty much have the same journey with Colin Farrell. Went from just being like, who's this guy? Why does he keep showing up in things? To being like somewhere where like I'm like, oh, thank God Colin Farrell's in this. Like, he's always he makes great choices now. He's just one of those. He's become a real character actor. Like, he doesn't do the same thing over and over again. Like, love him in Bruges. You're right. It's a new take on Penguin. I mean, I would say the closest I could even think, like, there's elements of like the Arkham games in this Penguin, like the tough guy Penguin. And again, it's a Penguin at the beginning. Like, it's we are very much at the beginning of a lot of these character stories at this point in the thing, which is awesome because it just lets them play in that. And the movie does so little time setting things up. Like, it's not a Marvel movie. It's not like, oh, maybe this will happen. There's one or two moments like this, but really it's just like, no, this is where we are in these characters' lives. Penguin has a bit of a journey over the film. Like, he's in it a lot more than I expected.
Sure.
I assumed, from the trailers that, like the classic, like, oh, maybe Batman takes him out at the beginning and then, moves on to a new villain or something. But no, he's very present throughout the whole film.
It's funny, though, because someone pointed out he's only in 3 scenes. And I was counting. I think he's in 5. If you count, like, he's really only in 5. Like, there's the car chase. Yeah, there's the car chase. There's the stealing the money. There's maybe one other one. And then maybe a short couple scenes later on, but he's not. But he's also in other scenes, just not focal in them. Like, he's in,
And
you're right. I'm not advocating for making superheroes more realistic, but Batman has always been a little bit more realistic than others. And one of the decisions I agree with this movie is, instead of spending 30 minutes having Catwoman's origin and 30 minutes having Penguin's origin, why don't we just say they work for the mafia, which is kind of what they do. They go, well, Penguin, you know what I mean? Like, Penguin is a tough guy. It's almost like the old Dick Tracy thing. The old Dick Tracy villains are all just criminals with physical features that give them those classic mafia nicknames, but they're all exaggerated. Like, I don't remember what they were, but like,
like Flat Top and
whatever they were, but they're all like and with these characters, it's like, he kind of looks like a penguin, so he's the Penguin. Like, that's how it should be, I think, with Batman. And Catwoman kind of looks like a cat, so we'll call her Catwoman, rather than she gets revived by mystical cats. Like, I'm not dissing Tim Burton's
cats.
Magic cats. I love the Tim Burton's film, but I think that was the wrong choice to make for those films. But
absolutely,
but anyway, so big fan. And also, I gotta say, I think that Penguin is one of the very few Batman villains that is for some reason, they haven't really gotten him right most of the time. Like, I loved Burgess Meredith as the Penguin. Danny DeVito, physically, I liked him. But Danny DeVito kind of has that New Jersey accent, right? And to me, the physical look of the Penguin in the Tim Burton's films, they were going for kind of like... well,
they made him into a penguin.
Yeah,
like, he's They gave
him flippers.
Yeah.
And but I guess what I mean is, like, I think they played up the Victorian kind of almost, I don't say universal horror thing, but like the top hat and exaggerating that stuff. And to me, I would have liked Penguin to be more like Burgess Meredith with that almost British accent. But with Danny DeVito, they went the other way with the New Jersey accent because that's what I assume he's from. He's from New Jersey. But with this film, they just throw that out the window and they go, it's almost like it's like a New York accent, but it's almost like an exaggerated, like 1930s New York accent, right?
Yeah,
Like he might as well be carrying a Tommy gun. And I think it's like, yeah, you know what? Screw it. Just do that. I think it works.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, Tom. Yeah, I could see him handing. Yeah, he's a very like he hangs out with Capone. You know, like there's
exactly.
He calls everybody sweetheart.
Yeah, exactly. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like just do that. Yeah, I totally like the take.
I mean, like with the DeVito, just the same as with. I feel like even just adding the caveat to like, yeah, we love Batman Returns. There's nothing that movie gets right about like any character. It's just a weird. Yeah. It's just a weird, like, awesome movie. It's a great Tim Burton movie that has Batman in it.
100%, I agree.
You know, some of the costume designs are sort of like Batman.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, you know, it's got like a weird Christopher Walken villain. Like it's got like, oh man, it's got a guy riding a giant duck all the time.
Well, I don't want to get into a huge Batman Returns thing, but if I can summarize the plot of the movie, it's a bunch of people fighting on a film set for 2 hours because that sure as hell is not a real city. There's no real people anywhere. There's shopping centers with no customers, right? There's empty streets. But anyway, that's a conversation for another time. But I love that movie.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. It's just not like it goes against everything about Batman that like it's just like Keaton's Batman and stuff. Like actually Keaton's Batman is good, but Keaton's Bruce Wayne, that's not Bruce Wayne. But I do love spending time with that weird character. So
totally. Yep. Yeah. I agree. Okay, so now we're going to jump to Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon. I just got to say Jim Gordon is probably my favorite supporting character in all of comics. Mm-hmm. He is so crucial to the Batman mythos. Mm-hmm. Gary Oldman, maybe the greatest actor of the last 2 centuries. Anyway, so I don't think anyone can beat Jim Gordon. And to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Jeffrey Wright, so I thought he was just okay. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of him, but obviously you were a fan.
I am. I'll say that, like, if I'm not... I don't want to get into a ranking game in that... Is he better than Gary Oldman in this? No, he's not. I mean, Gary Oldman has a very classic take on Gordon that I love. Is Jeffrey Wright's Gordon a great character in this? Yeah, he's solid. He plays. He's there for, his scenes with Batman are great. Like their back and forth is great. The fact that like we're 2 years into their partnership and we see a trust has already built on both sides is really cool. I would love to see how they met. And maybe we'll get more with him down the line. Is it like an Oscar-winning performance? No, but it didn't need to be.
Yeah. I guess the one thing I definitely appreciate is his relationship with Batman was perfect. Mm-hmm. Without getting into spoilers, there are scenes where their relationship comes into full folk. Like everyone can see what it is, and they kind of, I don't want to say exploit it, but they explore it, and I think that's cool because. It is in the real world. This would be a real weird relationship. You have a police lieutenant or captain or commissioner who works with a vigilante. It's interesting to explore that relationship, right? Like, how would that function legally? It couldn't, but that's the key to their relationship. So I'm glad that they addressed it at least, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you see the strain that it puts on Gordon's career a little, like, he's not as respected as maybe he used to be, and like, but on the other hand, he clearly is, so carries a little bit of weight, so people are like, well, clearly Batman's been getting some results. We don't get a lot into it, but like Batman, at least at this, because this is it's a year 2, right? It's not year 1, so, Year 1, Gotham is like, who's this Batman guy? Year 2, they're accepting that he's there, but they're still like, this is weird. Mm-hmm. It's weird that we're letting this happen, and it's weird that we're not talking about it the way we used to. But yeah, it's I always enjoy Jeffrey Wright. I think he's a a welcome presence in any movie. The movie did not have many casting lulls, if any.
I agree with that. Yeah, I'll agree with that. Okay, so we're going to jump to a couple more to go. Now we have John Turturro as Carmine Falcone.
Interesting.
Again,
did you know? I didn't know he was in this.
What do you mean?
Like going in, I didn't know. I was like, oh shit, it's John Turturro.
Yeah, you know what's funny? I don't know if I knew it either. I don't think he was in any of the media, was he? Like any of the previews? Nothing.
Not to the point where I had stopped watching trailers. No, so they
It
kept
might have
talking
been-
about
yeah.
Falcone, and I was like, oh, I wonder who's going to be Falcone. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And let's be clear, he's a great actor. Like I like everything he does, and he's the perfect guy for this role because now, correct me if I'm wrong. Was Carmine Falcone, was he the bad guy in Batman Begins? I don't remember.
Yes.
Okay, so it was the same guy. This guy, I like John Turturro much better than, I don't remember the actor that played him in Begins, but...
Tom Wilkinson.
Okay, I like John Turturro much more. I think he's perfect for this role. And I like the fact that the main bad guy of this movie is, again, basically just a mafia Don. He's not another supervillain. And this character goes back to Frank Miller, Batman Year One. You know, so again, a little bit more of that Frank Miller realism in there, which I like for Batman. Yep. So I thought he was perfect for this role. And we'll talk about spoilers later, but his performance was great. I'm sure you agree.
Yeah, Falcone's big. He's big in Jeff Loeb's, Long Halloween, Dark Victory, and Catwoman When in Rome. So it was cool to see them play a lot of that, and that's where a lot of the story beats come from that the movie gets into, which we'll talk about later.
Right. Okay, only a few more to go. Okay, so let's talk about this actor without talking about too many spoilers, but Paul Dano as the Riddler. I'm a huge fan of Paul Dano from Love and Mercy about Brian Wilson, and also Prisoners.
Sure.
A few of the movies I'm probably... There Will Be Blood.
There Will Be Blood.
I think he's one of the best actors working right now. And this is a completely new take on the Riddler, partially based on the Zodiac Killer from real life and also from the Zodiac film by David Fincher. What do you think of Paul Dano? Yeah,
I mean, he's alternatively terrifying, pathetic. Like he has a lot of layers. Great villain. Very scary. Very rooted at times in some of his schemes, rooted in some real life, both obviously the Zodiac, but also some more modern stuff that really kind of, you're like, oh, I could see some of this happening, and we are seeing some of this happening. So yeah, he was good. Without getting into it too much, we mostly see the scary Zodiac-esque version of the Riddler throughout most of the movie. That was cool. He has a very intimidating presence. Basically it just looks like a cross between Zodiac and Hush. He's good. What do you think?
Well, the thing is Frank Gorshin is still my favorite Riddler. He's so good. I mean, most people don't know this, but I think the Riddler only made 1 or 2 appearances in the Batman comics before Frank Gorshin played him. That's like 25 years or more of stories and only 2 or 3 appearances. Frank Gorshin is what made him a big character. And so I love Frank Gorshin to the point that I think that Frank Gorshin could play Riddler like today and it would still work. However, now that Paul Dano's played him, I see that there's a different way to do the Riddler that I think absolutely works because, I think the problem with the Riddler in the comics is they haven't really known what to do with him for a long time because they're like, well, all these other characters have like a tragic backstory, whereas the Riddler, they always kind of play lightly. But with this film, they hit it right on the head. No, there is a real supervillain called the Zodiac Killer in real life, and we can base him on that.
And he
using riddles and cryptograms. And it's like he's right there. Let's just use that as the basis. And the fact that he's not physically intimidating, the fact that he wears glasses, I think is so cool. The fact that it's got such a unique face because he's got like a round, cheeky kind of face where he almost looks like a little boy, but he's so intelligent, and that makes him scary.
It's
almost,
like
and
complexion like issues with his skin and like
right. And I don't want to. I'm not picking on Paul Dano physically, but he looks like the kind of guy that in any other film would play a serial killer, right? Like he fits that role. Like usually serial killers are recluse, right?
Yeah. Like, I said a really mean thing after the movie. I said a really mean thing after the movie last night, and it was, thank God Paul Dano really hit it big in Hollywood, or he might have turned into a Paul Dano character.
Yes, exactly. 100%. I agree. He's just got that face, right? But he's putting it to good use in this film. And again, we'll talk about spoilers later, and we only get to see him out of the costume for what, one scene, maybe two? That's pretty much it.
I think we get about 3 scenes.
Right.
Scenes.
And on one hand, I would have liked to see more, but on the other hand, it goes back to the whole Seven thing. We only see Kevin Spacey at the end of the film for the last 20 minutes or whatever it is. So
I guess maybe Paul Dano, unless you're a film nerd, isn't a big enough person that you could have withheld who played him. I kind of wish they did, though. I kind of wish...
That would have been great. You're right. Yeah,
I kind of wish I had no idea who it was, because you would not have known. Like, there is no way throughout the movie, using the voice that he uses and the costume that he wears, there is no way you would have gone, I bet it's Paul Dano under there.
You're totally right. And
you would have been like, the whole movie, you've been like, who the fuck is playing this guy?
Yeah, and we have to remind people, when Seven came out, Kevin Spacey's name was not in the opening credits. He was not advertised in the trailer. No one. And again, he wasn't huge. I don't think I really knew who he was, but he'd already been in Glengarry Glen Ross in a few films.
He was big enough for this to be a stunt.
Right.
He was big enough that holding him back was,
sure.
Hello. And also, 20, 30 years before we stop talking about Kevin Spacey completely.
Yeah, exactly. We're not going to mention that. Yep. Never been a fan of him otherwise. But anyway, okay. So there's one more actor we're gonna save for the very, very, very end of the conversation because we don't want to spoil things. But now we're gonna talk about the plot of this film, and I'm gonna jump back to what I was saying earlier about how I was with this film for most of the way, and then at some point, okay, I'll just say, big spoilers, folks.
I'm curious if I know what your turn was. So go.
Well, for me, okay, it's the Riddler. The Riddler gets arrested, and I'm with it. And I'm like, okay, here we go. This is Seven, but with Batman. All along, Bruce Wayne's been able to figure out all of his riddles. Once he gets captured and he's locked up in that in Arkham Asylum behind the glass, we get a really cool scene of them playing back and forth, but it was kind of one of those where I'm on the edge of my seat and I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. But then Riddler starts to talk about how his plan is not yet complete, and how could you? Oh, you're not as intelligent as I thought you would be, and how could you not have figured it out? And then I'm watching the movie and I'm like, did I miss something? And in my opinion, what we end up finding out, again, spoiler alert, is that the Riddler has planted, I believe it's 5 or 7 bombs around the city, right, to flood the city while there's a giant convention going on for the mayor. So he's intending to kill X number of people or whatever. I don't feel... Did I miss something, or did I completely miss the part where he reveals how those clues were laid and what his master plan was? Did I miss that?
Well, I mean, his master plan was essentially... His master plan was to expose the corruption of Gotham City, which he did, and then... He wanted basically the new, fancy, the new brighter Gotham to also get wiped away too. So like he wanted to expose the corruption, but then also sort of wash away the city anyways, right? So it was yeah. If I have any nitpicks, would be I'm fine with the last act giving him a bit of a like. He's gonna do a big thing, like a not murder thing, like he has a terrorist thing planned. I'm fine with that, especially spoilers because he uses like, internet idiots to help him, which is, 10 years ago we'd have been like, oh, that's so stupid, that would never happen. But obviously we know that we would be stupid to say that, because of course it would happen, and it happens all the time now. So him getting a little anarchist thing, the only thing I would have preferred is I would have needed like maybe one or two throwaway lines to just some exposition lines of how Gotham could be flooded earlier, or even if it was something where you were like, oh shit, and it's been raining all week too, like that, like if there was something that I don't know.
Well, that's the key is with when you're watching, again, we're gonna spoil 7, and even though the movie's 25 years old, I don't like spoiling old movies either, but you kind of have to. The whole premise of 7 is there are 7 deadly sins, and when we get to the climax of Act 2, there's been 5 committed. So the audience knows there's 2 more to go. And then the climax of the film, we learn what those 2 other sins are and how they've been committed, and it's the climax of the film. Well, it would have been nice in this movie if there was some type of thing where if he would have laid the clues for flooding the city, but we didn't know what the clues meant, and then like you said, if they would have set up the fact that the city can be flooded X way or something's happening with sewage, and then those 2 ideas come together, and Batman, there's like that aha moment where Batman, oh my god, I didn't realize that's what it meant. That would have fixed it, right?
Maybe we did miss it though. I am willing to give the movie the credit for maybe I did miss. There was so much going on. Maybe on another watch, maybe I will be like, oh, that's what he's doing. Yeah, because you're right. Now that I'm sitting away from it, I'm like, yeah, you're right. I don't quite get his end game here, except that he just, don't like people. But you're right. I'll give you that. But yeah, maybe we did miss that. I mean, for me, I think a little bit of the ending that I like is that, so, spoiler alert for 7, John Doe wins, right? I don't think that we necessarily need that in this. I don't think the movie needs the Riddler to have somehow been right. I don't need a Killmonger thing where you're like, oh, okay. There are elements to, Riddler's thing where you're like, yeah, he is exposing some inequities in the system, but, okay, cool. But I didn't really need a moment where you're like, he got him. So I'm okay with him getting captured and then Batman just being like, oh shit, I still have to do some heroic stuff, because the real ending of the movie is Batman sees that people can be inspired by him in a bad way, and then he realizes that the dark elements of him stuff, he needs to be more than that. And it leads to him realizing, there's that great moment where he saves the woman, and there's that wonderful, just that warm look on his face where he's basically just reassuring her that things are going to be okay. And it's the first moment in the movie where you see him break into a new thing and be a hero. And I think that's the true climax of the movie. I think you're right. Riddler's thing is a little, but on the other hand, so is the Joker's in the Dark Knight. What in the hell is going on in the Dark Knight's plan? I mean, yes, eventually, we get to a great scene with Harvey and Gordon and Batman.
Right.
But, we get Joker's 8 different, there's the cops on the roof and the hostages and then the 2 boats, and they're like, what in the hell does any of that mean?
Yeah, and we won't get too much into Dark Knight, but I do love the Dark Knight, but it probably goes on way too long. Even though what we have is fine. But anyway, we'll get back to this movie. I guess that's the thing, is that I was kind of watching this movie thinking, okay, if everything pays off, then it'll all make sense. But I didn't feel like I got that moment of oh, that's what it all meant. It was more just build up, build up, build up. And now here's the thing. I want to point out that some people have criticized the film, saying that because there was a break in production, because of COVID, there's a chance that the studio might have come in and said, look, we need more explosions. We need more of this. We need more of that. Because I did feel like the whole first 2/3 of the film were detective noir. And then the last third, you get explosions and people dying and things falling. Not to say that it was disaster, but I felt like it might have betrayed the tone a little bit. Like, do you think we could have been satisfied with a more subdued ending, a more subdued climax? You think that would have worked?
Could we? Absolutely.
Could everyone else? No.
Could you and me? Absolutely. Absolutely. But we'll show up to as many, like, we'll pay tickets to a movie where Batman never throws a single punch, right?
Yeah.
Is the rest of the population going to do that? Maybe not. Maybe not. You mentioning that it had a shutdown and maybe they were like, yeah, let's beef up the ending a bit. Makes sense. Kind of makes sense. And yeah, if there is a bit of a tonal switch, I would say it's not as drastic as saying it's the last third. It's really only the last like 10-15 minutes of a 3-hour movie.
Sure. Sure.
It's more like the mystery mystery gets wrapped up, right? And then there's another 10-15 minutes where, Batman has to do some heroic shit.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and here's the thing is, I think in some movies the plot matters, and some movies the plot doesn't. Like even Tim Burton's first Batman movie, the plot is not great. The plan, like Joker's plan and the way the movie climaxes is not great. What makes Tim Burton's movie great is the cinematography, the music, the dialogue's great, right? Everything about the movie's great, and to me, except the plot. But I think the one thing that Tim Burton's movie has, even over Nolan's films, is I think his films are more engaging to a general audience. Like if you were to have like for example, right now Whiff is playing movies last summer they were, where they're playing old films at the river. So these are films everyone's seen a million times, but you go and see it anyway with your friends, like whether it be, E.T. or Neverending Story or whatever. And they did play The Dark Knight and they did play Joker. But I think that Batman by Tim Burton would play better to a general audience. And I think you'd agree with that, right?
Yes,
right.
Definitely. Oh yeah, it's yes, absolutely. It plays very, very well, and it's a good thing to bring up with the Batman. In that, as I was talking about it with a friend last night, like, is it? I think it's an absolutely excellent Batman movie. I think it is a great movie as a movie as well. However, it is a better Batman movie than it is a great movie. Like, it is a better Batman story than it is an all-time classic movie, right?
Right, yep. I'll agree with that. Yep. So that's the thing, is that I think for me, the rewatch value of this film is more the tone and the atmosphere than the plot. Because now that I know what the plot is, maybe I'll rewatch. I mean, even, we've mentioned Blade Runner a couple times. Even Blade Runner, I've never thought the plot was particularly great. It's pretty good. It doesn't quite hold together. It doesn't quite climax properly, at least in the original cut. And so with this movie, I think the rewatch value will come from the tone more than anything, which I think they get right.
Like when you're in a mood and you're like, I could throw the Batman on.
Right, exactly. Now, before we get to the major spoilers of the very, very ending, let's talk about, do you like the twist with Catwoman? In this film, we find out that Catwoman is the daughter of Carmine Falcone. Are you happy with that plot twist?
Yeah, it's a big part in the comics, so I was cool with them doing it. She gives him the 3 scratches that he has in the comics. And I'm a big, I like them using it. I was pretty sure that was the way they were heading when we were starting to talk, like when the movie started getting into it, because it was like, all right, cool. Like I said, Matt Reeves is clearly a big fan of Long Halloween and Dark Victory, so I wasn't surprised to see it go there.
Well, again, this makes it closer to the Frank Miller sort of crime genre than it would like a typical Batman or classic Batman take. So I do like that. I like that she's tied to essentially the mafia. So I definitely agree with that. I think that the twist of a secret parentage, unfortunately, has been overplayed, especially because after Darth Vader, you can't really top it, right? Like you can't ever. Yeah, but other than that, I thought it was fine. What about the? And again, I didn't realize, to be honest, surprise, I've never read The Long Halloween or Dark Victory, so I don't know where this twist comes from. Yeah.
The Long Halloween is like the
say,
best Batman story ever written. Like the Dark Victory is the sequel to it. It is there. This movie is heavily based on it. It's Batman, going after a serial killer who kills people on holidays, and it takes place over a year of him tracking the same serial killer over a year. And it's very dark. It's very much a crime drama. It's very epic, and there's a lot of Falcone stuff in there. And like, yeah, Jeff Loeb's unofficial like trilogy is sort of like, so Long Halloween, then Dark Victory, and then I would say Hush is kind of the ending of Jeff Loeb's little trilogy, because the stories pick up through all three of them. And then he has a Catwoman one too called When in Rome that's really great.
Sure. See, here's the problem: is I'm not a fan of Jeff Loeb at all. At all.
This is why Jeff Loeb is famous.
Okay,
so
okay.
This is not. This is event. You got to get big to get bad, right?
Sure.
Like this is his great takes on stuff, and yeah, his later stuff is not great. He has. I haven't read much Loeb stuff, but his stuff that he did in the mid '90s. His Batman stuff and his Marvel Colors trilogy, Spider-Man Blue, Daredevil Yellow, and Hulk Gray, just phenomenal work. All-time great
Okay, well, I'll
comics.
give it a chance. For my money, I Batman Year One is my favorite Batman story. If
Batman Year One is your favorite, I think Long Halloween has a close chance of being your favorite, because it is very much it takes place, it's very much in the year one continuity. It's a year two story. It's very similar tone to year one, but with a little bit more from the Rogues Gallery,
no,
well, it has a little bit more in it from like Batman's Rogues Gallery, right? So
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, another twist I didn't realize came from those comics is the Thomas Wayne revelation, where you find out that Thomas Wayne helped Carmine Falcone, right? Mm-hmm. As a doctor. I guess is that in Dark Victory?
No. I don't remember this specific one being used. I mean, I some of this feels like we've gotten into Thomas Wayne stuff a little. Like Morrison got into a lot of Thomas Wayne stuff. Tom King gets into some Thomas Wayne stuff. Where I remember Thomas Wayne comes into Hush a little, but I've never really seen this specific story play out before. Like
and here's the thing: is there's kind of in the film they imply that there might be this criminal side to the Waynes, but then they kind of reveal, well, it's not quite what you thought it was, which is good. Mm-hmm. But and I don't know as much about Batman's lore as I do about Superman's, but I think one thing, I think it was Script Doctor PhD pointed out, is that one of the things about the Waynes is they should be a sort of beacon of hope in Gotham, because Gotham is supposed to be corrupt, right? And the only good man in Gotham is Commissioner Gordon. And I like the idea, because it kind of reminds me of the classic take on Krypton. To me, Krypton is only tragic if Krypton was a utopia and we lose the utopia. If Krypton is a cold, calculating dystopian society and it blows up, no one gives a shit, right? So I like the idea of Krypton being a utopia, and I like the idea of the Waynes kind of being this like great... what's that called when you spend all your money and help people? Philanthropist. Family, and then they get gunned down by random crime. I really like that idea. So at the end of the day, I'm not sure what we're left with. I'd have to rewatch the film, but at the end of the day...
They don't say. They basically... In this, the Wayne's murders remain unsolved, and the movie gives a couple of very plausible culprits, but then even Alfred says, or it could have been somebody gunning them down. Like by him saying that, I guess the implication is that is how everybody thinks it happened. Like they weren't gunned down in the alley, just like in the regular comics. The movie hints maybe something else happened. And I like not giving it one way or another, because I prefer your version too. Like I prefer the classic, like, the Waynes were gunned down in their prime. You know, I'm okay with Bruce's dad being, like, maybe a bit of a dick, but not, like, you know. I like him being
or he
a
could be
hopeful guy
distant, or he could be
distant. Yeah. Like, I'm fine. Yeah. So, but what the movie does get into a little, which we haven't really seen come into the movies a bit, is, and this is more modern Batman stuff is doing it, but getting into the Waynes and the Arkhams, who are like the two big families of Gotham. And I hope that it sounds like maybe we're going towards like a Court of Owls thing in the future. So that would be kind of cool.
That one thing this film does is it hints at just enough that you want more, right? I can't wait to see if they can do Court of Owls right. Oh, that would just be perfect, right?
I think they laid just enough groundwork that it would be like, oh, yeah, you started talking about some old Gotham stuff in the last movie. Okay. So I think it would be a good place to go.
So, okay, I want to talk about a couple things that I'm certain I didn't like, and I want to know what you thought of them. So when the Riddler gets arrested, or the Riddler is he assassinates Falcone, right? He shoots him, and it's a cool scene. You see him from up in the window. Then they go to his apartment, and he's gone. Okay, fine. But then the fact that right away they're like, we got a call. Somebody saw a guy going down the thing, and now he's in a coffee shop. That's fine. But I would like to have seen a gap of like a couple days of like, oh, the Riddler's missing for a couple days, and then someone's like, we spotted him. And I would have liked to have gone to a crowded place. So it would have been a little bit more danger or something. But the fact that he's like across the street and he's in this empty diner and he's just sitting there.
Why wasn't he just waiting for them in the apartment?
Yeah, exactly.
Because he's waiting for them in the coffee shop. Like, he's clearly like, I'm about to be arrested. Like, he took the time to, spoilers for anybody who's seen the trailer, he took the time to, like, you know, do a little bit of latte art. I
know. And
I remember hating that in the trailer, and when we got to the scene in the movie, I was like, oh, I bet that was just for the trailer. No way do they actually have the question mark in his fucking thing. And I was like, oh no, there it is. All right.
That's the thing is, sometimes, and Matt Reeves co-wrote the story. Sometimes you can really tell the difference between a screenwriter who writes from the perspective of a director and a screenwriter who writes from the perspective of a writer, right? A writer is going to write a logical plot with logical character motivations, and a writer is going to write from the point of view of what's going to look cool in the trailer, what's going to be a good shot, we're going to dramatically tilt over to the coffee cup, and it just doesn't make any sense, right? And like I just said, it makes for a cool shot, but logically you go, this would have been so much better if he would have been on the run, and it could have been like, again, John Doe.
Extra. I mean, he's pretty extra though. Like, you know, the Riddler, the Riddler, he's not playing with a full deck, man.
Right?
He's very dramatic. Like, he definitely took a class to get the latte art right.
Yes.
You know, like that was part of his grand scheme, like, you know. So, you know, whatever. It was silly, and it's no less silly than it was in the trailer.
Yep. Okay. So here's another thing. This is one thing I think the movie 100% got wrong.
Okay.
Batman standing around in a crime scene with 25 cops, and he's participating in the investigation. Am I watching the Adam West TV show? Like, I thought that was ridiculous. And granted, they have cops. Some of the cops go, what is he doing here? But to me, the whole point of Batman is he's supposed to be sneaky. He's supposed to appear at the crime scene before anyone gets there, figure everything out, and then vanish.
Yeah, Batman, no. When Batman's established in Gotham, he works with the cops all the time. He does.
Does he?
He does. Yeah, all the time.
In the Nolan films?
Not in the movies, but in like in the Nolan films, yeah, a little bit. But no, in the comics, yeah, Batman's always working with the cops.
To me, I think that it took me out of it because, okay, in the Nolan films, he kind of comes and vanishes. In the Tim Burton films, he doesn't even really talk to anyone. He's sort of there and then he vanishes. But in these films, he's standing there. And again, this is where you start to lose the suspension of disbelief. He's standing there. Yeah, he's standing in the middle of the room in a costume. And there's 25 cops around and they all just let him tamper with the evidence. To me, that took me out of it completely.
He's a big guy. I really like that line is my favorite in the movie, probably. Just like the cop being like, you really just gonna let him manhandle evidence like that? And Gordon just goes, he's wearing gloves.
Yeah, I know. Now, I did like the scene where Batman wakes up in the, not jail cell, but the kind of holding cell, and he's got like 25 cops around him.
Oh,
and
that was cool, yeah.
That was a good scene because I like the implication that he probably could have handled himself, even though he's got 25 cops on him, right? That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then him and Jim Gordon kind of whispered to each other the plan of how he's going to get out. That was cool. I thought that was fine. Yeah, but I just didn't like him. Yeah, it was great.
I'm okay with it because, again, I feel like I've seen Batman with cops a lot, right? Like, generally, like, it's kind of weird in the context of our modern world where you're like, Batman shouldn't be working with cops.
Right.
But at least in the context of the comics, once Batman is established and it's no longer his first year on the job, he becomes like a regular and like, he gets consulted on things, a little bit of the Sherlock Holmes element to it.
Sure. Okay, here's one more, okay? The Nirvana song, Something in the Way. Love the Nirvana song, love Nirvana. Was not a fan of it being in the trailer. And in this film, I was fine with it the first time. Yeah. And I don't know if they played it a second time, but by the end of the movie,
they played it twice, yeah.
Twice. I was going to say, I wasn't sure if it was 2 or 3. When it came in the second time, it felt almost comical to me because it was too much. It felt like, there's kind of this rule in writing, if one person is killed in a story, it's sad. If 2 people die, you're indifferent. If 3 people die in a row, you're laughing because it's like, how much tragedy can you take in a row? And that's what it felt like. It was like hitting you over the head with darkness, darkness, darkness. And when it came in the second time, to me, it was comical. What did you think?
I mean, it felt weird and like I like it in the trailer a lot. I mean, it's a great song, and I think it made the first trailer just so moody and great, and like I love that. I was like, oh, what a weird thing, and like for all the talk of like Matt Reeves thinking that this version of Bruce Wayne was more akin to Kurt Cobain. Okay, I get it. The first time they play, I didn't laugh, but the first time they played it in the movie, I was like, oh shit, it's in the movie, really?
I know. Me too,
I don't know why.
Too.
I actually have a big thing. I don't like when a song is a big part of a trailer and then shows up in the movie, because I'm like, what is this? This song has nothing to do with this movie. Like,
right.
The words are not like, these are not relevant to what's going on. It's
exactly
the music is, sure, I get it, it's great, it's a great song, and I don't like my when in The Graduate when they've played
Mrs. Robinson or
even
Hello
worse,
Darkness, My Old Friend.
No, even the third Simon & Garfunkel song.
Are you going to Scarborough Fair?
Yeah, Scarborough Fair. By the 4th time they play Scarborough Fair in Graduate, you're like, all right, I got it.
Yeah,
we're all parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme.
They overplay Scarborough Fair in The Graduate, but I must point out, I think The Graduate is the first movie ever to have an all-original pop soundtrack. And so they were kind of like, they made mistakes, but since they were the first one to do it, I can kind of forgive them. That's how I feel about music and repetitive music in general. So, right,
there was no way, and like I don't know. And if you're gonna use a song, if you're gonna use like one song in a movie, you get to do it at the end.
Right, not twice.
Not
twice.
It worked. Honestly, the second time worked better. Right. But because I had already heard it the first time and been like, it's in the movie, I was like, you already used it. You did. You had your moment.
You can't use it again.
already.
You're right.
So I would have been fine with one or the other. but I would have preferred just the one at the end.
Yep. Now the other thing too is I think pop music worked in Guardians of the Galaxy, and raindrops falling on my head worked in Spider-Man 2. But for the most part, I don't think pop music really works with Superman or Batman. And one of the huge flaws in Tim Burton's Batman film was the Prince soundtrack. So overall, I would have liked to have just seen a classical score in this.
How dare you, sir?
God,
How dare you? You're not.
We'll do a Burton's Batman review another time, but oh my God, no!
Get into it with you about Party Man.
Did you like? Did you like? Chat. What's it called? Nickelback and Spider-Man 1 Hero.
Your heroes
ruin the movie.
No.
Okay.
But you know what? I think this might be maybe a pet peeve that you and I just share. Maybe people don't have as big a problem as we do. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's
sure.
Like, the day I will lose my mind is if they ever throw a song into a Star Wars movie. I will just. Oh yeah. I will walk the fuck out. I mean, Beastie Boys and Star Trek was enough.
Yeah.
Beastie Boys played like 10 times in Star Trek. Oh my God.
Bad. I'm with you on that 100%. Okay, so now there's one more big thing I want to talk about. And this is this is like the second last scene of the film. Before I get to this, is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we get to this last scene in the movie?
I assume I know who we're about to talk about.
Okay. So let's just leave it for the... Okay, so I'll just say, when I saw this scene, I absolutely hated it, okay? Because I felt like this was studio notes. They did this in Batman Begins. Spoiler alert, in Batman Begins, in the very, very... I think it's the last shot of the movie, Jim Gordon hands Batman a playing card and says, We've had trouble with this guy, blah blah blah, and he hands him a card and it says Joker on it. It's a picture of the Joker, and Batman's like, I'll look into it. Well, in this film, we get the Riddler talking to someone, and we don't know who it is, but the voice on the other side of the wall says something along the lines of, oh, blah blah blah, they'll think of you as a Joker. Then we get a clown. Okay, yes, you're right. Then we see...
Thank God.
Yeah, you're right. It would have been way too on the nose. Yeah, Jesus, you're right. Then we get a shot of this guy, and I'm thinking, gee, if we're going to have a close-up of the guy, you'd think they'd get someone who's not just some generic stunt double in shadows playing the Joker.
It's not.
But it's not. Did you know that who it was?
I had heard that he was in the movie, and people had been talking about it for a while, that they thought he might be the Joker. So, I mean, I guess we're so deep in. So it's actor Barry Keoghan. I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm sorry.
I think it's Keoghan.
Keoghan.
Yeah, Keoghan.
Keoghan. He's probably Irish.
Is that how you pronounce it? Okay.
I don't know.
Keoghan? Okay.
I don't know. Sorry, everybody. He was in Eternals. He's the weird guy from Killing of the Sacred Deer. He's the weird guy from... Dunkirk. He's the weird guy from... He's the weird guy in the movie.
In every movie you've seen.
Night. Yeah.
He's also... I recommend a movie called American Animals. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Excellent, low budget, heist film. It's a great movie. I recommend American Animals. So anyway, this guy's one of my favorite current actors, especially because of The Killing of a Sacred Deer. So I only found out minutes before we started this podcast that he was the Joker. And I gotta say, I was totally on board with them just reusing Joaquin Phoenix, but now that they've cast him, I'm like, of course he's perfect for the Joker.
He's interesting. I am less enthusiastic. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I hate that scene. I hated the scene. It felt like I liked the scene in Begins. This one, I felt like we cut away out of nowhere to like one of the endings of one of the Schumacher movies.
Yeah, I agree.
Where it's the villains teaming up and like being like hoo hoo hoo, or I mean, just going back to the '60s, really. So I was not a huge fan of it. Barry Keoghan is somebody who I did not like upon my first few encounters with him, but he is growing on me. He was one of the bits I enjoyed in the Eternals. One of the few. So I'm willing to do it. And, so for anybody out there, who's like all like, oh, we're going to see the Joker. Not really. He's in shadow. But you get enough of a look at what they probably... You'll get enough of a look at what they probably will do. He looks very more along. He looks pretty scarred. His hair is pretty wild. So so we're gonna see a younger Joker. We're gonna see that. I hate the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movies, so I would not in any way want that in this. I wouldn't want this anywhere near that.
See, here's the thing: is I think the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie is an average drama, but I think that Joaquin Phoenix was great in that role. Like, he's one of my favorite actors. Now,
I like Joaquin Phoenix a lot. I'm not, and I could, and me not admitting that he's great in that is just me being stubborn. He is, of course, he's great in it. He's great in everything. I'm just not a fan of the movie.
And also, it's also a different take on the Joker, right? It's not he's not as
I wouldn't really call him a take on the Joker, period. I wouldn't call that the Joker at all.
Well, there's a case to be made for that. I'll agree. Like, there's almost nothing. He doesn't come off as frightening. He doesn't come off as frightening in a Joker way. He comes off frightening as like a school shooter kind of way. Like, just like Paul Dano, right? Like, not intimidating at all. It just happens to be a serial killer. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I really hated that ending with that scene, to the point that, oh boy, I question whether it was even directed by Matt Reeves. As far as I know, it was, but wow, that stuck out like a sore thumb. Eh?
It was weird. It definitely was weird. I mean, I don't know how much of it was a studio note or anything. As far as it sounds like they were miraculously very hands off with this one. I think they've gotten so much flack for messing with things over the last few years that they're giving people a little bit more leash than they were. But yeah, in another movie, the scene wouldn't have even stood out to me. In this movie, I spent so much time appreciating, you guys aren't spending your time setting up a cinematic universe. Oh, you're not, like, you're just telling a story. That was the first scene that I was like, well, you don't need this in the movie. Like, you don't need to set up another movie. I'm going to see the second Batman movie. And also, it's too early for the Joker. Give me another movie. Give me a break. Give me another break. He can come in the third movie,
Well, also, look, we all know that the Joker is going to come eventually anyway, but it's so obvious at this point that they might as well, like, having him laugh and cackle and say clown. They could have had a shot of Barry Cogan, or whatever his name is, sitting there and just smile. And you would be like, that guy's probably going to be the Joker. But the fact that they smash you over the head with him laughing and using the word clown is just so stupid, right?
For me, it was just the team up. I was like, I don't need a team up, guys.
You're right.
Joker hates teaming up with people.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah. So overall, okay, so I was with this movie, and again, I'm not going to say I hated the last act or whatever. I didn't hate it. It's just that I didn't think that it paid off well enough. And as far as rewatch value, I'll definitely rewatch it more for the tone than for the plot. However, the 3-hour length does hurt it. I'm sure you agree.
Yeah?
It could have been shorter.
No, honestly, I didn't feel the length at all, and I usually do. I was one of the people who kind of, like, as soon as they announced the length, I was just like, come the fuck on, guys. Yeah. We don't need this.
Right.
Like, Spider-Man No Way Home was like 2 hours and like what, 40 minutes? And I was like, come on, guys. Just make a 2-hour Spider-Man movie, you cowards. And I felt that. And, like, the Nolan movies got longer and longer as they went, to the point where, like, Dark Knight Rises, was... maybe 15 minutes shy of 3 hours. And they felt it. This one, I didn't really feel it, just because I felt that the plot was progressing in a very natural way. And there wasn't, like, the Nolan movies have a lot of stop-starts where, like, things build to a climax and then they stop and then they build to another climax. This is, like, a pretty consistent all the way. and then there's like maybe the last 15 minutes where it just sort of like feels like it kind of shifts gears a little. So the length didn't hurt me, but it might on rewatch, because now that I know the mystery, it might hurt me on a rewatch, because now that I'm like not engrossed the first time out trying to pick out all the little clues and stuff, on a rewatch I might be like, all right, this is
right. And that's where I think might affect, like I said, if you're going to show a movie at a drive-thru with a bunch of kids sitting on blankets, you're still probably going to show Batman by Tim Burton before you show this. I can't imagine a general.
I hope so.
I just again, this is, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I mean, if they would have made 7 with Batman, that would also not play well with the general audiences. So
it would not. It would not.
So I guess you can't have it both ways. But I still don't think that even on what it was trying to do, it wasn't entirely successful. I think overall you liked it more than me. I definitely liked it up to a point, but then I felt like it spidered out at the end. That's my final take.
I think it's a fair take.
Okay. Now, final question. Where do you rate this in the overall ranking of Batman movies?
Ooh, I've been trying to figure that out myself. It's I like right now it's probably hovering in my it's in my top 3, top 5. I would put, I don't even know if I have a ranking. I put it up there with Batman Begins and Dark Knight, and I put it up there with 89. So I don't know which ones, catch me on a different day and my mood shifts,
Sure.
So I think it is up there with the greatest Batman movies, and it is maybe the purest Batman movie.
See, okay, it's funny because with the Nolan films, I was actually not a huge fan of Batman Begins. I loved Dark Knight. I think Dark Knight's probably the best superhero film. And Dark Knight Rises, despite all of its flaws, I still love Dark Knight Rises. I love that movie. I could watch it over and over again.
I do quite a bit. I just have a lot more issues.
Criticisms, So I would say that if I were to rank Batman films, I'd probably go Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises, then probably 89 Batman, then Batman Begins. And the highest I would go for this movie is then number 5. It's about, to me, about as good as Batman Begins in that I feel like it's promising more than it delivers.
Okay.
What were you going to say?
I forgot to mention Phantasm. Phantasm's my number one Batman movie. We all knew Batman Mask of the Phantasm.
But wait, what about Lego Batman?
I like it, but I'm not.
I love Lego Batman. Okay. Yeah. So that's a discussion for another time. Okay, so I guess that wraps up our The Batman review. I want to thank Andrew Barry Helmer from That Was a Show for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, especially considering, the power went out, there was construction, we had to reschedule twice. So yeah, I really appreciate it. And we'll do this again sometime. You're a frequent guest on Here Comes the Spider-Cast. So yeah, be sure to check out every episode of that on comicbooksyndicate.com, as well as every episode of Flea Market Fantasy Full Volume Podcast and the Comic Book Syndicate regular show that reviews movies and comics. I guess that's it. So we'll see you next time.